Yep.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about a place that's kind of an intersection between what I teach, spend some time researching, as well as some hobby activity, things that I personally have passion for. My escape from stress is through nature photography, and so I spend a lot of time in the field. When I'm going to do a sunrise with golden rods, I use a very wide angle lens. If I'm going to look at specific animals or species like this barred owl, I'll use a telephoto lens. And if I want to get in really close and some small leaf, like this insect here, I'm going to use a very different macro lens. Each lens gives me a different perspective. How we see is similar. We know that light refracted through a convex lens like our eyeball is flipped upside down. So everything we see is inverted. We also know each eyeball has a blind spot where the bundle of nerves makes it so you have no rods or cones. And yet our brain has no problem filling in those areas and making things look upright. So we have this amazing ability to see. Turns out that believing is seeing. Because we don't see reality, we adapt our perceptions and conform to our desires, our expectations, and our experiences. And different people see things differently than you do. And the more unclear or ambiguous the information, the more that people will see what they want to see. Some of you, if you're old enough, will remember the huge internet controversy about this dress. Was it blue and black or white and gold? Taylor Swift tweeted, "I don't understand this odd dress debate, and I feel like it's a trick somehow. I'm confused and scared." This reflects thinking when we understand that not everybody sees things the same way that we do, and we don't understand how that can be. So take a look at this image and tell me how many different colors of balls you see. Most people will specify there are 3 different shades of those spheres on there. Obviously, it's a trick. They're all exactly the same. It's the color bars that cross on those spheres that create the illusion of there actually being a difference. So context influences what you see. Context matters. With this illusion, you should see a checker that has an A and one that has a B on it. Which one would you say is darker, A or B? Most individuals would say A. Obviously, again, it's a trick. They're exactly the same shade of gray. My students don't believe it, so I have to show these gray bars to prove that they're same. But because of the shadow of the cylinder, we get confused. So what do you see here? Most people report they see an upside down map of the world. Well, then I would ask, why do you say it's upside down? And it turns out it's because that's the way we've always done it, and it seems wrong. However, we have to remember that different perspectives create different visions. We see things differently from a different vantage point. The Cydonia Mars face is a classic example. In 1976, the first orbiter, Viking 1, that went around Mars, snapped shots and took this image on the left, which is striking because clearly there's a Martian face looking at us. It wasn't until 2006 when we got much more high quality lenses that showed it was just shadows and light. But if you're a conspiracy theorist, you will never believe there's not a cover-up of Martians giving us information. So the perception of reality is based on the focus of what we attend to. In one classic study, when people are told to pay attention to either police officer or civilian in a video during altercation, the subject's perception of what happened aligned nearly perfectly with what they were focusing on. So it depends on what lens you're looking through. This is a great study that was actually done by Gallup, where they sampled people 1 week before and 1 week after Trump won the election in 2016. Notice the complete reversal when asked about which way is the economy going. Obviously, the economy had not changed in 2 weeks, but the perceptions completely flipped, whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican, about where we're headed with the economy. So what we see depends on what we're looking for. Our deeply held beliefs are a vital part of us. We tend to ignore evidence that proves us wrong, and we reinterpret information that supports our beliefs. This is of course, the confirmation bias, which is very powerful. But this makes taking new perspectives particularly hard because we all succumb to this. Think about the news sources. Personally, I enjoy flipping back and forth between Fox News and MSNBC to see how they're spinning some element in the news. My wife cannot stand it. And most people have a hard time with this because you know deep in your heart that one of them is right and the other one's completely wrong and full of lies. That's just how we see things. We align ourselves with one and know the other's incorrect. But it's like this cartoon. Is it a 6 or is it a 9? Well, it depends on how you're looking at it. Or with this cartoon, lady on the left says, everything covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. And the woman on the right, nothing covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. In the end, we know it's all the men's fault anyway, but very different cultural perceptions. So the more that a person believes in a paradigm, the more they will identify with a group of similar others. So our beliefs become part of our actual identity. And it turns out the stronger the person's identification with a group's values and beliefs, the more difficult it is to change that person's mind. And there's a lot of research about this. So it's a fascinating phenomenon. Here's one example. Samuel Cartwright was a doctor in Mississippi. In 1851, he had diagnosed the condition drapetomania, which is the disease that causes Negroes to run away. Now, as twisted as bizarre as we see that, Evelyn Hammonds, a Harvard historian, said that it makes sense to him because if the natural state of the Negro is to be a slave, then escaping would be an unnatural act. African Americans see their experience in workplace discrimination different from the rest of adults. Gays and lesbians interpret other signals about discrimination towards them very differently from other adults. There's not agreement even on these facts and activities that people are having. Why? Because we're coming from a different position. We have a different perspective. Here are 66 companies that I'll use in some class presentations, and I'll ask what do they have in common. Turns out in 1955, the Fortune 500, the 500 companies that were there, only 66 exist today. What happened to the other 434? Well, they did not pay attention to their blind spots. Their perceptions were too locked up and they were unable to change. Peter Drucker says, most business failures are not the result of things being done poorly. Businesses fail most often because the assumptions on which the organization has been built and is being run no longer fit reality. And the famous economist Schumpeter said, it's not the owner of stagecoaches who builds railways because it's so hard to see differently. So we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. My recommendations are, first of all, know that you have blind spots. You might be wrong, or you might be seeing things very different from others. We've got to have humility. Intentionally seek out new and different perspectives. Occasionally change your lens. Go from the wide angle to the telephoto to the macro. And if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. I will close with a quote from the poet Audre Lorde. It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. Therefore, we must try to see differently. Thank you very much for your time. And I will try to stop sharing.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. I enjoyed the way that you highlighted how our own perceptions of things create our reality. Are there any questions or comments from anyone in the audience?
That was a very awesome presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I think the recommendation of trying to see different perspectives is essentially what we need in this time of so much division. So thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I guess I just have one question. You're suggesting that we try and see things differently. How do you do that on a regular basis? Yeah, it's easier to preach it than to do it, obviously. And this is true for all cognitive biases that we know, but I teach about this a lot. Even those who know the most doesn't mean it's easy for them to do it. I actually try to use the metaphor I started with. Because I use different lenses for different types of photography, I try to think that way in the rest of my life. I need to change lenses periodically so that I'm not looking at the really micro thing in front of my feet,
but rather I want to look long distance or have a bigger view. So I actually try to use that metaphor to try and force myself to think about things differently. And that's why I'll switch between news channels or try to read information sources that don't naturally fit with my own interpretation of how things are, just to try and force myself to see differently.
Steve, do you have an example where in your own experience where maybe something, because you consciously decided to try to see something differently, it really changed the way that you thought about something in a way that was unexpected?
Yeah, I'd have to think about it a bit. I guess one that would come to mind actually is, you know, there are a lot of hot topics out there. One that I've played with mentally a lot is gun control. So I grew up primarily out west. I own a lot of guns. I grew up hunting regularly all the time. That was my bonding activity with my father and my family's activities. And I had a hard time understanding those Easterners' perspectives of why they want to get rid of guns. So I have spent a lot of time trying to read data and information sources. And I think both sides have extreme issues where they only paint one side of the picture. So I think today I have a much fuller understanding of the positives and the negatives associated with something like gun rights or gun control. And I think either extreme does not understand the issues of the other side. So I have changed my thinking on a number of things. And that's one example that comes to mind, Dane.
Cool. Thanks so much. Hey, are there any other questions or comments for Steve before we move on? Okay, well, hey, Steve, thanks so much.
Thank you.
That was great, and I really appreciate you being the very first lunchtime speaker in the Williams Honors College.
I wish you'd have told me who was attending first. I hope you didn't lose money from the Williams because of me.
No, that was great. So our next talk will be given by Markus Vogl. Markus, are you?
I'm here.
You're here. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen, I'll give my brief introduction. Markus is an associate professor of art in graphic design at the Meyer School of Art. He's currently faculty director for the M Lab, which is the Meyer School of Art Makerspace. As an artist, designer, technologist, and academic, his current creative research addresses digital fabrication, data visualization, large-scale outdoor sculptures, interactive installations, and interdisciplinary collaborations. And really, his work and the work of his collaborators, as we'll actually see today, explores the intersection of art, design, and technology. He received a National Endowment of the Arts Award in 2012 and 2018. And well, in 2018, he was a Fulbright Fellowship and an artist in residence in Vienna, Austria. And his work has been exhibited on 5 continents and is held in national and international collections. So, Markus, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Hey, well, Dane, thank you so much for organizing these. I think those are super fun, and I really appreciate the invitation. And before I get started, I just wanted to make sure that everybody sees the single slide and not necessarily my notes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, thanks for the introduction again. I'm an associate professor of art, as Dane mentioned, and I also coordinate the emerging technologies minor that we have at Myers. My studio is called Benitez Vogl Studio, and we are completely collaborative amongst our students, but primarily with my partner, Associate Professor Margarita Benitez from Kent State University. And we contextualize ourselves as interdisciplinary technology artists, and we practice at the intersections of art, design, making, and technology. And really, I feel that the most interesting work occurs across these boundaries, especially sort of on the fringes. So we work with data and materiality across mediums, and the work manifests as sculptures, wearables, and interactive installations. And the first body of work that I wanted to show is called Skin Deep. digital epidermal ephemeral patterns via 3D printed application. It's essentially a prosthetic that is scanned to fit the model precisely and is pressure fit. The model wears the shell for about an hour, the 3D printed shell for about an hour, and this is a hard shell, resulting in about 15, 20 minutes of impression of stylized snake skin. And the project really investigates the ephemeral nature of skin imprints, more designed to lead to a larger philosophical discussion about beauty modification and the body as a medium. And we take this concept a little bit further with 3D printed flexible necklaces. So these are not necessarily precision fit, so they have actually little strings in the back. And once they are removed, they reveal messages, type messages as well. So it's no longer just the stylized snake pattern. It now actually presents the body as a medium of communication as well. And most recently, I'm interested in the process of these ancient techniques called cupping. So there's fire cupping, where the vacuum gets achieved by lighting a glass cup on fire. But there is also a way to do this with a vacuum pump. And so I 3D print custom designed little cups, and then I remove the air with vacuum pumps. But I specifically seek out models that have been called derogatory phrases and slurs, and I cup those phrases onto their skin as an opportunity to empower the victim, name their stories as the slur slowly dissipates. So the cup has to be worn for about 10, 15 minutes under vacuum pressure, and then you get about the same time where then slowly but surely that slur cathartically dissipates. My second body of work is digitally fabricated outdoor sculptures, where I'm essentially removing the artwork completely from the white cube. And it results in habitats and enhancements for animal species. So the first project here is glow up spider rings, which is a sculpture specifically designed for spiders. This is actually move-in day. So they live in, the spider itself lives in this top cubby, and the ring itself lights up at night. So it has this blue glow. It hangs in a tree. This specific one is in Bath Nature Preserve during the summer months. It hangs in the tree, and the spider moves in. And since the light attracts insects, it deems this as a good habitat, and then spins its web inside of the sculpture. So what you actually see inside of the spider ring itself is the web of the sculpture, is the web of the spider with little insects inside of it. And in the very center is the spider. So it's either in the center of the web or it's in the cubby during the day. We also make 3D printed turtle platforms. So those are designed to swim in the lake, to sort of float in the lake. They light up at night as well. Turtles can warm up on them, and then researchers can use it to study turtle populations. We have 3D printed bee and pollinator waterers. Those are essentially placed in pollinator gardens. They have different height ridges, so as the water resides, insects, bees, even birds sometimes still can get to them. And so the way that actually looks when it's in nature, it sits in a pollinator garden, and then it helps with water availability for our pollinator friends. And then one of the last projects that I wanted to show you out of my studio is actually chimney swift towers. So chimney swifts are near threatened because chimneys are either removed or closed by homeowners, and their habitats are shrinking. They're an amazing bird. They can't perch. They can only sort of live on. They can only essentially be on the siding of the inside of a chimney or the inside of a hollowed out tree. And the little ones actually learn to fly in these towers. So there has been efforts of bird lovers to mitigate this crisis by building these fake chimneys, like the one you see here. And then most of them are simply square brick chimneys, which works. But the fact that they are 10 feet tall, I was thought lends itself rather well to create an outdoor sculpture. And so we're working on a digitally fabricated CNC 10-foot sculpture that is ultimately a sculpture that exists as art, but for the sole purpose of acting as a habitat for a near-threatened species, where we marry fine art, avian-centric design, meaningful function, and then actually bring art and that discussion about art directly out into nature, away from the white cube. So on the left-hand side is our 3-foot model. On the right-hand side, this is 8 foot of tower. So these pieces have to be individually CNC'd. And on the left, you see Drew, my intern, who is also an emerging technology minor. And as part of our emerging technology minor, you can do internships. And Drew has chosen to do his internship in my studio so that he gets actually direct exposure to CNCing. But there is just a massive amount of work with this. I think we have about 100 machine hours in. The bottom section is still missing. Level 1 and 2 is joined. Level 3 has to be joined, and then level 4 is still missing. So we have still quite a bit to go, but that particular tower is going to go into Bath Nature Preserve through a grant through the Akron Audubon Society. So we're working on that, and that is also really a great way of showing how our students get exposed to real life experience. And so the Meyer School of Art has its own makerspace. It's called MLab. I'm the faculty director there, but we house large-scale laser cutters, small-scale laser cutters. We have about 10 3D printers right now. We have the large CNC 4 foot by 8 foot. And then we also have an AR/VR lab. And the makerspace extends directly into the classroom to our emerging technology minors, where the students actually learn how to use the machines. So we have basically a kitchen sink class where we introduce the students to all these machines, and then an in-depth class where they get introduced to also other emerging technologies like AR, VR, Arduino, projection mapping, that type of thing. What do we make? Jewelry, rings, earrings, 3D printed planters and vases, bowls, coasters, and of course, we make Zippy. Large-scale Zippy, small-scale Zippy, keyring Zippy, giveaway Zippy, all kinds of Zippy. So this is we designed that faceted Zippy in-house, and we have been working on that since quite a bit. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I hope I left a little bit time for questions.
Thanks, Markus. That was very interesting.
Certainly.
Are there questions from the audience or comments?
I have a question. I wasn't sure if you mentioned this already or not, but the structures that you made for insects and animals outside, are those made out of a biodegradable kind of material, or are they plastic?
Well, there's quite a bit of polymers that sort of have this distinction of both. So they are made out of PLA, which is polylactic acid, which is technically biodegradable. In a sense that it has to be still composted for quite a few years, but it is biodegradable. The tower itself is made from foam. There is no really good biodegradable foam, unfortunately. The biggest reason it's made out of foam is because it has just really good insulation property, and the birds itself. One of the problems with the chimney that are sort of homemade are that it gets really hot inside. So if we have so much foam structure in between that we have nice cooling, and then we can still transport it out from the studio to the field, which is quite a bit of an issue otherwise. So yes and no. Biodegradable foam, on the other hand, if there would be some progress on that end, that would be lovely.
Markus, could you maybe talk a little bit more about your different programs in the minor that you mentioned?
Right. So the makerspace is open for everybody at the university, but so is the minor as well. So we do have marketing minors that take marketing majors that take our minor, students from really across the campus, and we want to attract the students. We're really interested in that cross-pollination between art students and other majors, be that marketing, be that engineering, where we can have a little bit of a more of a dialogue in between. But since it's housed in Myers, probably half to 60% are art majors, and then 40% or so are others. If we can make that mix half-half, that would be great.
Looks like James, you have a question?
Hi, Marcus. This is James Egan in the polymer science.
Cool.
We produce polyurethane foams that we make directly out of carbon dioxide. And
Nice.
they are technically similar to PLA in the sense that they are degradable. So
Nice.
we should have a follow-up discussion about potential collaboration. I don't think we can make 8 feet worth of foam, but we can certainly make some prototypes.
Right, so that's the other issue. So if even if I have to go foam, I have to order like this massive amount of foam blocks, and so I can't just use foam from like Home Depot. And so in our research phases, getting the quantities we need is just really complicated. And so I would love this follow-up conversation, and maybe there can be something done down the road here. That would be exciting.
See, now this makes me happy. Are there other questions or comments? Heather, you raised your hand.
Hi, Marcus. Wonderful presentation, and I'm having lots of feelings about it. I'll probably email you later. But I had one quick question. My yard is a certified monarch way station for pollinators, and I'm having trouble with the watering system I've got going. It's not optimal, but yours look fantastic. Wondering if there is one you'd like to try out in my yard, or if there's a way I can buy one from you somewhere and stick it up in my yard and share it with my friends.
Just shoot me an email.
Okay. I'll email you about that.
For sure.
Okay,
For sure.
great. Thanks.
No problem at all.
Anything else?
I actually had one comment. Sorry, just before we move on. I was not aware that we had this minor, emerging technologies, which sounds amazing. After seeing your presentation, I feel like I would have loved to be involved in some way. I'm going to be graduating soon, and so I don't think I have time to do a minor. But I think just kind of spreading the awareness that anyone, you don't even have to be related to an art major, can take this minor would be great. Because if I had known this my freshman year, I probably would have done it. Just wanted to, yeah.
Thank you for those kind words. So it's relatively new. It's basically a year old. We're on our second semester, and this is why sort of when the opportunity came up with Dane, I'm starting to sort of talk a little bit more about it, amongst the entire community, and that is our goal. And we made it in a minor that's really easy to do. So, I mean, if you can always hang on a semester, it's really an easy minor to get. There's a very few overlapping classes, that there's really 2 core classes, and then the rest can be easily filled. So let your advisors know. And for that matter, if you guys have any students that want a minor, that would be great. If you guys could send them our way, that would be lovely. Really appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, I think definitely. I even went online right now to look at all the other minors that are similar to this. I'm going through them, and they're all like 18 credits. So I was like, okay, that's only one more semester.
That's awesome. Dane, I think you're muted.
I was muted. You'd think I would have learned by now, after almost a year to the day. Anything else for Marcus before we move on? Wayne.
Yeah, I just, unfortunately, I have to leave, but I just wanted to thank you for putting this together, Marcus, for this. It's such a refreshing break in the day and in what we normally do, and you learn some things. So thanks very much. Really, really terrific.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad this has come together as well as it has. If you have to go, that's totally fine. I am recording this. So our last talk, which will be delivered kind of virtually by Heather Pollack, like that will be available, the recording, or actually you can go to the Pechacucha website and see the recording as well. Laura, do you have a
Hi.
question or comment?
Hi, I do. I just want to say that both Steve and Marcus have taken advantage of Bath Nature Preserve, I think, for their nature photography and for the sculptures. So I just wanted to invite everybody to check out the University of Akron Field Station. That's where where we're located, and we have lots of great things coming up for the spring. So we have 4 owl prowls coming up this month, and an open house on the 20th, a bird book being released. So it's a great resource for the university, and hopefully some of you will catch us out there at some point.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a beautiful place, beautiful facility. I would urge everyone to take advantage of that. So without further ado, our last talk will be again delivered virtually by Heather Pollock. This is a Pechacucha that she gave, I believe, about a year and a half ago. Is that
2017.
Right? 2017.
Yep.
So Heather is a proud Akronite. She lives in Highland Square. She was born here in Akron. As you will come to hear, she left briefly and returned in 1997. She's a former radio personality, which I think is where I first heard her voice, and currently is a visiting professor of instruction and loves travel. And in fact, that love of travel has really kind of come full circle. She led a group, she often leads groups of honor students on study abroad trips. She's been to Antigua, Guatemala twice, and has recently become the coordinator for the University of Akron Study Abroad program. She teaches several unbelievably popular honors colloquia here for us, including classes about the hero, the culture of fear, and honestly, she's just one of those people that gives back to whatever she gets involved in tenfold. So I'd tell you more about her, but I don't want to tell too much because her Pechacucha is all about the things that she loves. So if you give me a second, let me switch over to a different computer and bring this up. So again, this is a Pechacucha that she delivered in 2017. So I believe you can all see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. I may be having technical difficulties. Let me. Okay.
Do you need me to resend the link?
No, I have a link. I just had to click a button to make sure that I shared computer sound.
Oh, good.
In The Empire Strikes Back, just before Han Solo is frozen in the slab.
I'm going to restart this. Okay, so here we go.
In The Empire Strikes Back, just before Han Solo is frozen in a slab of carbonite, Princess Leia says, "I love you." Han's reply, "I know." Wouldn't it be great if we could always communicate with people so flawlessly, if every time we expressed ourselves we were understood? These days I'm beginning to think that might only happen in a galaxy far, far away, or perhaps a long time ago. Language is so important, but it trips us up constantly. We use the wrong words, we misuse jokes and sarcasm, we rely on emojis, emoticons, and 140 characters to say what we mean. There's a lot of room to get lost in that. Sometimes we just don't speak each other's languages. So we miss things we should have taken for granted, or take too personally things we shouldn't have. So what if the way to really communicate is to skip all those traps and tell each other our stories? Could we use them to be understood? Could we use them to see what others have taken personally? When we take things personally, where is it exactly we take them? Gotta be the heart, right? Hearts somehow respond to things. They burst, they stop, they break, they recognize. And they make room for the things we've collected from our stories. Maybe that's what all the chambers are for. So we listen to people's stories, even if they're not the same as our own. Could we see them better? Maybe take each other by heart? Let's try it. Before I start, listen to the things that are in my story and think of something in your own that reminds you of what I've just given you. Let's see where we connect. In no particular order, the 99 times my heart just stopped. When I was about 3 and my neighbor, Mr. Guzman, put up a scarecrow for Halloween, and he put a microphone through it that I didn't know about because I was 3, and when I came up on the porch, it said my name, and I peed my pants. In Oz, the first time I saw a huntsman spider, which was dead and still closed up this way, it was the size of a fist. When once I was too drunk to drive, and I did anyway, and I sort of came to on the freeway that was closed for construction. When my deaf dog Tucker was a tiny puppy, I'd accidentally left the door to my apartment open, and he got out, and for the longest hour in which I and all of my neighbors searched for him, I thought I'd lost him. When on our first date, I told my husband I was going to grill this guy sitting behind us about something I'd heard him say, and Matt said, "Go ahead, I got your back," and he meant it. He knew who I was, and he meant it anyway. That time in Santorini, when I drove a moped along the edge of the caldera in the black of night because it was the only road to where I was going. Leaning into the wind over the cliffs of Moher. Waking up for the first time to the Rockies outside my bedroom window. When I was traveling in England and happened into York Minster at the exact moment that a cloistered chorus struck up a hymn from the 15th century. Driving in southern Spain, watching the heads of the sunflowers turn to follow the sun across the sky, all afternoon long. The first time I heard someone say woman when referring to someone my age. It was the first time someone referred to me as a woman. When Dr. Stewart held up this gooey, slimy, beautifully naked baby, and I asked if I could touch her, and he said yes, and she was mine, my daughter, my favorite story. When I borrowed a Twister game from my girlfriend Janice, and before I could give it back, she was murdered, and I didn't want to part with it, but I couldn't look at it for the longest time. So it sat in the trunk of my car, and has been in the trunk of every car I've owned for the last 25 years. When my ex told me he'd had an affair and I punched him in the mouth hard, twice, and I had no idea where that came from and what it meant that I could do it, and I found my strength at exactly the same moment that I learned that that thing was broken, no matter how strong I was. When at age 35, I had to put my 55-year-old mother in a Medicaid-funded nursing home, and she turned to me and hissed, "How can you take away my credit cards? You know I don't have any money." When Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Philandro Castile, Sandra Bland, Sandy Hook, San Bernardino, Vegas. In 9th grade, when I had just run in my first track meet and my ankles were killing me, so I called up my first boyfriend as I iced them, and he broke up with me, and I pretended that that crack in my voice was from my ankles hurting. This past year, when the resistance took a hit, when the good ones went too soon, when we lost the rebels, when we lost the election, when Han Solo died in The Force Awakens, when doves cried and we traded our beloved Starman for the man who sold the world, and the head of the Alliance, she persisted no further. In 3rd grade, when Mrs. Kirk said all the kids with summer birthdays could bring a treat on the same day to celebrate, and I brought peaches from Zalays, and the other kids were angry with me that I didn't bring candy. And as I sat alone eating my peach, I looked down the bench where there was my teacher eating one too, and she nodded at me before taking her next bite and said, "Good peaches." I think it's why I became a teacher. In 1st grade, my dad took me and my friend Sarah sledding. Her parents were out of town for one night, and she had a 16-year-old babysitter. And her leg accidentally got caught under my dad's weight, and it broke, and he carried her all the way home in his arms and called her parents. Once when my neighbor Paul hit me in the face with an ice ball, and before I could take off my boots, my mom had hunted him down and was shoving snow in his face. True story. When I found my little brother looking for a radioactive spider so it could bite him and he would be like Spider-Man. Or another time when I asked my brother to kill a spider I'd seen, and he said, "No, Heather, spiders have families too." When I got my divorce and my friend Nate greeted me with a hug and held out a tiny yellow Matchbox car with racing flames, and he'd said, "Happy divorce, how about a hot rod?" When I had taken a semester off school and moved full-time to Wyoming, and then just when I was about to return to Ohio, I called an audible and headed in the exact opposite direction to Perth. My dad faxed me, it was the early 90s, and told me to follow my heart, and I went. So yeah, it's more like 19, but 99 sounded way cooler, and time tonight is short. In any case, in my lifetime, my heart has made room for fear and grief and beauty and grace and awe and agony and gratitude, just like yours, right? Different stories, but just like yours, right? At the risk of revealing how much of a Star Wars nerd I actually am, I'll go once more to that well. Ever notice how no one mentions that every single character in these soon-to-be 8 movies is multilingual? How Han can chat with Greedo, and even Chewie understands R2-D2. And for those communications outside of words, there's always the Force, a deeply personal frequency that connects everything in the universe. The only subtitles in Star Wars are for us, the folks from this distant galaxy. So until we live in a galaxy where we all speak the same language, or one in which we're able to understand several languages or communicate telepathically, maybe it's time we started listening to each other's stories so we can take each other to heart instead of for granted. Maybe we could all try to take each other a little bit more personally. Thank you.
So, thank you, Heather, for allowing us to view that. I
Thank you
have
for
to say
not
I've
making me do a new one.
I have to say I've watched it like 5 times now. Are there any comments or questions for Heather? I think that was the one that is there for inspiration. So with that, if anyone would like to say anything, ask any questions at all, please feel free. Ashley, you got your hand up first.
I was wondering if there's any way that like we can see that link or watch that again besides just this recording on Google Teams, on Microsoft Teams.
It's available on the Pecha Kucha website. So you can search for it. You could probably email Heather. She's raising her hand.
Dane, I have a little bit better link, a little bit better recording, and I'd be happy to share that if, Ashley, if you want to email me, I'm HNP1, if that helps, but I think you can find it on the invite for this meeting.
Yeah. Maybe we could share it in the chat. I think if you have it now, I think you can do it now, or we can do it later. I think you'd still have access to the chat. So Ivana.
Yeah, I had a quick question. Well, first of all, I was kind of processing that 6-minute video because it was a lot for 6 minutes.
It is.
But very interesting, kind of inspiring for me to kind of do your own thing and just go out and not have any regrets. But speaking of regrets, my question was, would you add any of the things you regret into that list of that, like the things that make you feel like you've accomplished great things in your life, or any of those regrets? So I guess my question was kind of
I can tell you very quickly. I'll try to tell you this quickly. I literally have 2 regrets, and I'll tell them to you. When I was a kid, there was a girl in my class that invited everybody to her birthday party every year. Everybody in the class was invited. And I didn't do that. I would always just sort of invite a few of my friends. Not that I was one of those mean girls, but I would always have a small party, not the whole class. And my mom asked me, don't you want to invite, her name was Katrina. Don't you want to invite Katrina this year? And I said no, and I regret that for the rest of my life that I didn't invite her to my birthday parties. When I was 10, my aunt who owned a restaurant had us all for Easter, and there was lamb and there was ham or something like that. And she always made really great steaks, and I wanted to have a steak. And I said to my mom, do you think I could order steak? And there were like 30 people. And my mom said, yeah, go ahead and ask, which I never should have done. I should have just eaten what was given to me. And I've always regretted that. And I know those are 2 seemingly mild things, but I think the answer is that you got to work out what you got here before it gets to the stage where you hold on to it as a regret. And I've worked really hard not to have those. And so those are the 2, and they were mostly out of my control because I was a kid.
I guess that's kind of amazing that you only have 2 regrets from ages 10 and below. And honestly, I don't have a question, but just a comment, like if we could get to that point where you're like, I don't know, you only have 2 regrets and you're like, yeah, I was a kid, there's nothing else. I love my entire life. I aspire to be that at some point.
Let me just say, I don't think it's inspiring necessarily. I think it's mostly a series of accidents and trying to be intentional. But here's the thing. I've said a lot of things I wish I hadn't said, but I think that's different than a regret. And I've done some stupid stuff, but I think those are different than regrets.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I have one quick question. Has your heart stopped since 2017?
Yes. I wasn't anticipating, after that long list, which wasn't even the full list of people who've been killed by police, I wasn't anticipating in 2020, in the middle of the shutdown for the pandemic, that we'd see George Floyd too, and Breonna Taylor, and the many more people who've come after that. So yeah, my heart stops each time I have to read that and have to watch us respond terribly to it. But my daughter rode her bike to the park by herself yesterday, and that stopped my heart too, for good reasons and terrifying reasons. So I'll try to end on a high note.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Heather. Again, we'll try to make a link to that available. And I am recording this, so there will be a link on our Honors Advantage page, or if anyone else is interested.
I've got it here. I'll pop it in right now. There we go. Okay.
So with that, again, I would like to extend my just sincere thanks for being here today, for taking time out of your life to join us. Hopefully learn a little bit, hopefully ask a few questions, but certainly be inspired. Again, I'd like to thank Gary and Pam Williams for joining us today. We are really very excited to have you here, and incredibly grateful for all of the things that you've done for us and for our students in particular, with your generous support of the Williams Honors College. So with that, I think, Heather, do you?
Sorry, I just wanted to say I couldn't put it in the chat, so I just texted it to you, but you can pop it in the chat if you want.
Okay, cool. So I'll put that in the chat once the meeting's over, and you should, again, have access to it. So again, thank you all for coming. I hope you have enjoyed this as much as I have. I do plan to make this a regular event, so look for additional announcements, possibly even as soon as 2 weeks. We might have another batch of speakers. So again, thank you all. It's a beautiful day outside, so please enjoy the weekend. But be safe, wash your hands, and take care of each other. So with that,
thanks for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. I think I'll say goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, Dane. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
In The Empire Strikes Back, just before Han Solo is frozen in a slab of carbonite, Princess Leia says, "I love you." Han's replied, "I know." Wouldn't it be great if we could always communicate with people so flawlessly, if every time we expressed ourselves we were understood? These days I'm beginning to think that might only happen in a galaxy far, far away, or perhaps a long time ago. Language is so important, but it trips us up constantly. We use the wrong